Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Hope you're all well and okay. Today we visit a gentleman that is from the old school, I think is probably the best way of putting it. Someone who was from a time when if you gave someone your word, you had to sort of stick with it, which is the way it should be really. Or if you did someone wrong or there was an issue, you had to sort of step up and own it really. And yeah, definitely from the old school ways. So I'm talking about a gentleman that was called Mr. Roy Pretty Boy Shaw, someone that is probably best known for his underground unlicensed fighting and boxing and his criminal activities. So we visit his final resting place, we pay our respects to him. We also visit his childhood home in Dagenham, which is where he lived with his parents, and we also visit his address in Waltham Abbey, which is where he lived in his later years. So it is really interesting story actually, dead interesting. But before we get into the video, I just wanted to say a huge thank you to his daughter, Chatina. So I actually reached out to her because I just wanted to confirm some details, and to be honest, I wasn't expecting anything back, but she did come back to me and she was quite generous with her time and just run through some bits and pieces with me and just confirmed what was right and what was wrong from the information I had. And she was also kind enough to send me like a collage of photos that the family had put together and was used for his funeral. So I'm going to drop that into the video in a bit as well. But yeah, I just wanted to say a huge thank you to her, and I really appreciate her help. So Mr. Roy Shaw was born in March on the 11th in 1936 in the Stepney area, and as a very young kid he was actually moved out of London because of the Second World War. And once the war was over, he actually settled in Dagenham with his family, and he didn't have the easiest of childhoods. He actually had it quite tough. Believe it or not, he was actually bullied like really badly for a period, and he really struggled with things. And then when he was 10 years old, he tragically lost his dad in a motorbike accident, and I think that sort of really pushed him over the edge, which is understandable. It's absolutely tragic. And I think the combination of the constant bullying and him losing his dad just sort of got him to a point where he'd had enough, and he decided to stand up to the bullies and not take it anymore. And all of a sudden he sort of realised that he was pretty good at looking after himself. He was pretty handy at fighting, and before he knew it, he got a reputation for being quite good and someone you didn't mess with. And he actually got into boxing and he did really well. He was really successful, and he competed at quite a high level. And as times passed, he actually enlisted in the National Service, and again, that wasn't the easiest of times for him, if you can call National Service an easy time, I suppose. He actually really struggled with being told what to do. He never got on with his commanding officers, and there were several like very violent altercations, and he spent some of his National Service time in Colchester prison, which was an army prison. And then after a particular violent incident, he was actually given a dishonourable discharge, and he left the army, and he married his partner in 1961, and they had 2 kids, Gary and Chatina, who I mentioned previously. And then in 1963, he was part of a gang that robbed a security truck or van in Kent, and they were arrested several weeks later, and he was actually sentenced to 18 years, and I think he served a total of 10. But even during that period, he was pretty much moved through every prison in the UK because he just had such a violent temper and couldn't cope with the being told what to do and getting on with the prison guards and certain other prisoners. So there were quite a few very violent altercations, And there was actually a time where they tried to medically sort of sedate him and treat him and calm him down and calm his temper down with injections and medicines and so on. But he also crossed paths with quite a few people in prison, which I suppose you would do. He crossed paths with the great train robber, Ronnie Biggs, and Ronnie actually invited him to be part of his escape, which Roy declined, and sort of, I think his thought process behind it was, look, I don't want to escape and then have to be on the run for years and not be able to do what I need to do freely. So he declined, and I think by the time Ronnie Biggs escaped anyway, Roy had been moved to a different prison. So I think in his later years he actually got really heavily into his training, his weight training and his boxing and his bag work, and he sort of harnessed all his energy into that, and that sort of got him through his later prison years to the end of his sentence. And when he came out, he actually got back into his underground fighting, and he did really, really well. He had several major, huge fights, and he really made a name for himself and became really popular. And he sort of became a bit of a celebrity in his own right as well. He released several books about his life and autobiographies. There were several documentaries made about him, and I think there was a film as well, which he was a part of. And he also got into the property world as well, and he was quite successful at that. But again, he had some grief and drama with that. I think some people tried to take advantage of him, and there was like huge amounts of money involved, hundreds of thousands of pounds, and it went to court, and I think fortunately the court ruled in his favour, but I'm sure it didn't do his health any good, the stress and grief and hassle of it all. But he also found a new audience. His fights found a new audience through YouTube, and he had sort of younger fans and became quite well known. As I said, in his later years he moved to Waltham Abbey, and he was diagnosed with Alzheimer's, and he tragically passed away in 2012. So it is, as I said, it is really interesting. I'm surprised it hasn't been made into like a series or a film, because you can definitely imagine sitting down and watching that. It would be really cool to sort of sit down and watch. But certainly a gentleman who you wouldn't want to upset or get on the wrong side of or cross. I don't think he was actually like a really huge guy. I mean, physically he was big, he trained and all that obviously, but he was sort of a normal height-ish, about 5'7". And I read somewhere something about he was just not a normal guy, but he would just sit there calm and listen to what you've got to say. But the minute you said something he didn't like in prison or whatever, he was given medicine, or they were going to try and give him injections and so on, he would straight away in an instant just sort of flip and change into the scariest guy you could ever want to meet, or never want to meet rather. So yeah, definitely a very interesting character. So if you've watched his fights on YouTube, guys, or you've got stories that you've read his books or photos or any other info, as always, please let me know in the comments below, guys. Yeah, so the gentleman that was Roy Shaw is buried just here, just in front of Jade Goody. In loving memory of our dad, Roy Shaw, 11th of the 3rd, 1936, 13th of the 7th, 2012. Not just today, but every day we will remember, gone but not forgotten, forever in our hearts, R.I.P. Never more than a thought away, loved and remembered every day. So the house that Roy Shaw lived in as a boy with his family is just coming up on the right. So it's this one just behind, just here on our right, with the green door. Number 99. So this is the childhood home of Roy Shaw. So that is the house that Roy Shaw used to live in. And he lived there up to shortly just before he passed away with his dogs. And it is a beautiful road. And it is tucked away . As always guys, I hope you enjoyed the video and all the normal stuff. If you could please like and subscribe, I will be really grateful. And as I mentioned, let me know your thoughts in the comments below, and we will see you on the next video.